So I wanted to look at all of the upcoming 2026 releases as I think you have a lot of interesting, potentially really good films here lined up. So starting with Scream 7, this would be the first release on this list in February. I think you have a really interesting continuity of the Scream franchise. And we get another movie here following Sidney Prescott later in her life. And it looks like a lot of the plot is going to focus on the new Ghostface targeting her daughter. And I think for the Scream fan base, it is something that is really becoming a cult classic and is really increasingly popular. And then at number 10, I have The Devil Wears Prada 2. I think this is a really interesting sequel, and I think the first movie is one of the more interesting comedy movies, especially for its style. And you have, of course, Meryl Streep and Anne Hathaway returning here, and it looks like the premise is going to follow the industry turning to a more digital age, along with Miranda now having to compete against her former assistant. But at number 9, I would have Minions 3. I think you saw a really interesting phenomenon for the second Minions movie, as it really turned out to be a theatrical experience. And you had pretty much a big trend of people going to see the movie, both children and adults. And I think you've really seen that the Despicable Me movies have really turned out to perform well theatrically. You have the last movie coming in at $940 million. So this would be the seventh Despicable Me movie in the franchise, and I think it's just an overall fun animated film. And at number 8, you have The Return of Narnia. Even though this is a Netflix produced movie, you are going to get a theatrical release. It's not just going to be a Netflix exclusive. And I think the really interesting thing here is that this is going to be a prequel to the first one, and this is following the mother's nephew storyline, which really sets up how the wardrobe and everything came to be. And I think since you saw the first original Narnia movie being pretty big in the box office after inflation, it would be well over $1 billion. And I think you have a pretty solid cast that this definitely has the makeup to make for a great anticipated movie. But at number 7, I would have The Mandalorian and Grogu. And I think you have an interesting trade-off here. I think on one end, you do have the return of Star Wars in the box office or on the big screen, but I don't know if it's going to quite reach the numbers that you had with the sequel trilogy and the overall excitement of Star Wars, let alone it having the full package. And I think if anything, this could be a little bit more comparable to something like Solo that isn't as close to the original movie experience, but I do think you have a lot of interest in the Mandalorian and Grogu characters, and it's been a while since we've even seen them in some of their TV shows. So I think this will be an interesting and fun movie to look out for. But at number 6, I would have Moana. I think the really captivating thing here is that this is going to be a live action adaptation of the animated movies. And I think really the closest comparable would be Lilo and Stitch, which was the biggest box office movie worldwide last year, which was also a live action adaptation of an animated Disney storyline. And you had this being the only movie to reach over $1 billion in terms of an American produced movie. And at number 5, I would have Toy Story 5, which I think is an interesting one here as well. But you are having the return of a lot of the classic voice actors, but now the story would really shift to also a little bit more of a modern theme, with the toy's new owner also getting a tablet, which is really going to be their biggest competition. And I do think these are fun movies with a really clever premise. At number 4, I would have The Odyssey by Christopher Nolan. And of course, this is going to be a live action adaptation of the common school book or Greek mythology tale of Odysseus and his journey home after the Trojan War. And you do have Matt Damon playing Odysseus along with an all-star cast here. And at number 3, I would have the Mario Galaxy movie. I think you had a pretty successful first film and a pretty quick turnaround here in terms of getting the sequel out here. And I think with a lot of other video game adaptations, it is really looking like this is becoming a big lane. So I think this will be a really big, fun family movie. And at number 2, I would have Spider-Man Brand New Day. I would say out of any superhero in this age, I think you really have to hand it to Spider-Man, as he definitely is the biggest draw for any single superhero film. And I think, of course, you have a lot of momentum still coming from the the Spider-Man No Way Home movie. So I think there is going to be a lot of curiosity for how this movie looks aesthetically, and I think it's also going to be a big draw, not only looking at the success of the past Spider-Man movies here in the MCU, but also since it is going to be a big setup for Avengers Doomsday, which is the #1 movie on this list. I think this definitely has the biggest potential to be the biggest box office draw of 2026 and also one of the more interesting movies. And I think this film has great potential because with the addition of Doctor Doom, I think you have a character that can really rival the presence that Thanos had in the last two films. And I think there is a lot of curiosity about the origins of Doctor Doom or where this film is going to go. But really for a lot of these films, I think it's going to depend on the word of mouth for how the movie actually is when they release. That's really going to carry it throughout the box office. But feel free to let me know any of your thoughts on these, and I'll see you later.